In a world asking the question, what if the movies that got delayed came out on time and they were different? That's the case in my universe. I'm Steven Shinder, and you're listening to Delayed Replay, Season 5, airing every other Saturday, unless I change my mind. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we recap and review movies that got delayed in that other universe but came out on time in our universe. I'm your host, Steven Shinder, and joining me once again for, I think, the first time in nearly a year. I think last time he was here was for the Star Trek Forward episode. It is Mr. Zach Arnold from Intergalactic Peace Coalition, Commusings, Zach Arnold Productions, and what have you. How's it going, man?
Oh man, you're giving me a laundry list of all the different stuff that I've been a part of, and it's giving me a swelled head. So thank you, I think, or curse you, depending on if you were trying to inflate the ego too much, just so I could be let down.
Yeah, I guess I should have used cold water on the laundry, right?
Probably. But I'm excited to be back. This topic that you've brought me on for is one that's very near and dear to my heart for a lot of different reasons. And so to be a part of this episode is really special. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we're talking about Mufasa, the Lion King, and we might have similar views or different views. Like, that can happen. So yeah, we'll talk about that. But first, what's your experience overall? Like, I already sort of know, but just for anyone who might be listening to this who doesn't know, what's been your experience with the Lion King franchise?
Yeah, I basically grew up on the first Lion King movie. It came out in '94 and I came out in '93, so the movie and I basically grew up together. And it's something that my brother and I watched on repeat when we were kids. And whenever my mom needed a nap, she would put The Lion King on because she knew we would be engrossed for a solid 90 minutes. And so like that was kind of like our comfort movie. Some kids grow up on, Aladdin or The Little Mermaid, or one of those other. Beauty and the Beast is my wife's favorite Disney movie. So like I think everybody from the mid 90s had some sort of a film from that Disney golden era that they gravitated towards, and for us it was The Lion King. And then we had a lot of fun watching The Lion King 1.5, and I know a lot of the quotes from Lion King 2, unfortunately. Um, but I'll tell you, one of the things that really surprised me was The Lion Guard. I was very pleasantly surprised in my watch through of The Lion Guard. It actually has a really good story. It has some very accurate science behind it, talking about migration patterns and what crocodiles do to assert dominance in their groups and things like that. So like there was some scientific accuracy to it. There was some building of the depth and the lore. And then by the final season, they had actually found a way to improve upon and enhance Lion King 2, which I didn't think was possible. So the Lion Guard is probably one of my favorite things to come out of the Lion King universe, because I mean 1.5 was funny and 2 was decent, but I would say that like as far as the tier of favoritism goes, it would be the Lion King, and then right underneath it the Lion Guard. So big fan of the franchise as a whole, though.
Yeah, I've had kind of a similar journey. I was born in '94. Like, the original was just a few months older than I am. So we grew up with that VHS in my household. And
Oh yeah.
later we got the VHS for Lion King 2. And I kind of get nostalgic about the commercials that are like in front of the movie for that one, because they would advertise things like the Lion King on Broadway and stuff like that. Some remake of Mighty Joe Young. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Really?
Like, big ape
See,
movie.
yeah, I know what you're speaking of, but your previews sound very different from my VHS previews. And
Oh,
that's
interesting.
that's really interesting because for ours, it was Pocahontas, and it was Jonathan Taylor Thomas live action Huckleberry Finn movie.
Oh, wow.
And then like a couple of kids that were packing their suitcases preemptively in anticipation of going to Disney World.
Oh, I think I remember something like that in front of the original Lion King, or maybe Toy Story even. I'd have to check.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so those were the ones that were on our VHS, but that's interesting.
yeah, and I think growing up, there were maybe a few years when I felt like I maybe preferred two over one, but then I came to my senses and I'm like, no, I do like two, but one is clearly the better movie. Like I do like the story of two and some of the songs, but I think one is just on a whole nother level. And then when one and a half came out, I remember the marketing for that, this whole reveal that Timon and Pumbaa were there all along during
Mm-hmm.
the first movie. And
Mm-hmm.
when we got that, I pretty much memorized like all the jokes and the gags in that movie. I thought it was hilarious. I saw the Lion King not on Broadway here in the States, but over in London, and I think it was West
Oh,
End when
really?
I studied abroad back in 2017. And then, of course, the photorealistic remake came out in
Mm-hmm.
2019, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was average at best. Like, it didn't get me as emotional as the original, like as I was hoping. But there were like a few changes here and there I thought could have improved the original if they were in the original, but as they were in the remake, they didn't really like elevate the remake all that much. And the Lion Guard, like you mentioned, it definitely geared toward a younger audience, but even still, it's so surprising all the care that they put into it and how you get attached to the new generation of characters and like Kion, who's this son of Simba that we didn't know about. That there was a different son named Copa in some book that came out in the 90s, so that fueled a lot of fan theories, apparently. But yeah, I
Well,
thought Kion and his friends were interesting, and I loved season three and how the show wrapped things up.
yeah, season three was just like a whole other animal. But the like you said, the care that they took, and even some of the musical numbers. Like
Yeah,
I think there's a couple of songs in the pilot and then in season one that I think rival the music of the movies, in my opinion. And so
yeah,
like they did a really really good job. Sisi Nisawa, We're the Same, that he sings with Jasiri the hyena, is like up there with some of the higher up musical numbers that happen in the Lion King franchise. Like it's respectful of the cultural language. It's in keeping with the theme of the circle of life, but also is something that can be expressed by new characters and like is in keeping with the tone of the story. Like all of it was just really well done. So um I did really enjoy that series. You mentioned the Broadway or a play production. I will admit that is one thing that I have not gotten around to doing yet. I keep waiting for my wife and I to like go up to Broadway or something and be able to see it like on Broadway, but we just haven't gotten around to it yet. So that is something that's on my franchise bucket list, as it were.
yeah. I think the performance that I saw, the guy who's playing Scar kind of did like a couple little things that kind of made the character come across as kind of goofy in a couple moments. But the moment where Simba reacts to the loss of his father and is like, "Come on, Dad, get up," I got really emotional and teary eyed, and it's like, okay,
Oh,
they
really?
nailed this part. So like that in itself is an achievement of this whole thing. And yeah, just the props and the costuming is so like it was an event.
Well, I think that's an interesting segue into our topic for this evening because the story of Mufasa inherently has a very definite and dramatic ending. So I have to admit, I was one of the people that was very surprised that this announcement happened at all, that this movie happened at all, whether animated or photorealistic, that somebody with such a definite, defined fate would warrant an origin story of this depth and this magnitude. I was surprised, but being such a fan of the franchise, I was also on board with seeing something else to help add to the lore.
Yeah, because here's the thing with Mufasa. I've long thought that, a prequel story talking about his origin would be really cool. I just thought it would be more fun to do in 2D animation. Growing up, like even as late as high school, I even watched The Lion King in 3D whenever they released it around that time. And yeah, Zazu was the only thing that really popped out of the
Yeah.
screen, but it was so cool. And I was on such a Lion King high, and I even considered making like a fan fiction of like the story of Mufasa, but of course, with how busy I was, I didn't have like all that time to like write a full story of it. So it's an idea that I've long thought was there for the taking. I'm just not as big of a fan of the photorealistic animation route because the colors aren't as vibrant as they are in 2D animation. But I know that for others, like it might work well enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I think the vibrance that you're talking about is something that 2D animation can get away with that not even 3D animation has been capable of as of late, in my opinion. And you take a look at the 94 film with musical numbers like I Just Can't Wait to Be King or even Hakuna Matata, like there is some very vibrant coloration going on in there that is meant to help magnify the emotion that's going on in that sequence. He's experiencing joy and happiness at the thought of being the future king, or he is just come off of a very serious low and he's experiencing this high, and they're going to brighten his mood by brightening the colors around him. Like it's like this subtle form of storytelling within the animation that just doesn't really exist in today's animation style or even in photorealism. I think they're so focused on making it seem real and tangible and plausible that it loses some of the charm because you're not doing those types of visual enhancements. You're sacrificing it for moving a CGI mouth on a character. So I'm
Yeah.
personally not a huge fan of the photorealism either, unless you have like a human character to kind of serve as like the central refocusing point. I think that is where in my opinion Jungle Book is actually a bit superior to The Lion King, because
Yeah.
you don't have to suspend your disbelief entirely. You have like a human character or two that you can kind of focus back in on and then see what they're experiencing around them. But in the Lion King franchise, you don't have that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was trying to figure out like why do I like the Jungle Book more when it does the same like sort of photorealistic thing, trying to make the lighting look more like our real world. And
Yeah.
yeah, like there is a human character. And this might be like a minority opinion, but I kind of like the 2016 Jungle Book more than the 60s animated one. And I grew up on the animated one,
Mm,
watching it over and over.
mm. I would agree with you if it wasn't for Phil Harris. I freaking love
Yeah.
Phil Harris, man. Like he knew how to play animated characters, and then the people that animated his characters brought him to life so well. If it was anybody else besides Phil Harris playing Baloo, I would agree with you. But that's like the one factor in there. But the scene with the apes and the orangutans and such, way better with Christopher Walken than with what they gave us in the older version for sure.
Oh yeah, I kind of forgot it was Christopher Walken for a moment, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like the original Baloo. Well, I say original even though there's been like a million Jungle Book adaptations, but original as far as Disney
The
Jungle
Disney
Book is what I
original.
mean. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like I definitely prefer Phil Harris Baloo, but yeah, I guess we're still on the same I correct me if I'm wrong, the same sort of opinion that we were impressed by Jon Favreau's Jungle Book, whereas The Lion King that he did felt like a little bit of a step down, at least.
I feel like that's accurate. It was a very slight step because like for what it was, there were some grand scenes that looked great in the photorealistic sense. But I think the overall story that was told, I think it was told better in Jungle Book's adaptation than it was in Lion King's. And I think Mowgli was one of the big factors having like essentially he played like a straight man. It kind of like when you have all these comedians and you have the one person that takes everything seriously to kind of be the foil. In a world of photorealism, you had like this metaphorical straight man of sorts, where all of the other stuff is crazy and weird and happening around them, but they're playing it straight. They're playing it real. And you can kind of see where the realism is versus where the imagination is supposed to take over. I don't think you get that in The Lion King because it's all the CGI characters. You have nothing real to kind of balance reality from imagination off of. And that didn't do it for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something to that. Like some of your reasoning, like it makes a bit more sense of like the why of the different reactions to these things.
Mm-hmm.
So for this one, Mufasa the Lion King,
Right.
it's a prequel, but also kind of part sequel because it sort of picks up after the first photorealistic Lion King, and we
Right.
see Simba and company. They're, he's trying to raise Kiara, and she's like getting into trouble and stuff, and he wants her to know about what her late grandfather went through to be king, as a sort of example. And so we have Rafiki telling the story of Mufasa, but we also got characters like Timon and Pumbaa kind of chiming in and adding a bit of comedy to the telling. So what did you think of this method of telling the story of Mufasa?
Uh I like the idea of having respect for your position. And I think that's what this prelude was supposed to be about. Like you're going slightly into the future in order to step into the past because it doesn't seem like Kiara has a respect for the crown or has respect for her position as future queen. And so to help give her some of that perspective, you have to actually help her see what it took to get there. And I respect that. I don't know if that's exactly the way that I would have done it, but it makes sense. Like from a storytelling point of view, you have to have some point of context that will take you to where you need to go. And I don't think there's any better narrator or storyteller in the whole franchise besides Rafiki. And so to have Rafiki be that point that sends you back, that was logical. That made sense. It was safe, but it was logical.
Yeah, it is kind of neat the way that he makes the drawings of the different characters on the tree, and it would sort of transition to the past. And so we see a very young Mufasa as a cub, and his biological parents, Masego and Afia, they are voiced by Keith David and Annika Noni Rose. And Keith David, I know from like a bunch of comedic stuff, like Community, Rick and Morty. Me and my roommates even saw him sing the song that he sings from The Princess and the Frog at a Disney jazz concert last year. So, like, the moment he started speaking, I was like, oh, I recognize his voice.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How about that? I did not catch on to that. I mean, I know certain voices that are pretty iconic, obviously Seth Rogen, Billy Eichner, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but I really appreciated being able to hear Mads Mikkelsen's voice. I know I'm jumping ahead just a little bit, but um, getting to hear voices like that was a pleasant surprise because I didn't really do a whole lot of research on the IMDb before going to see this film. I saw the trailer. I knew it was from a franchise that I enjoyed. I knew I wanted to go see it, yada yada. But to hear voices like that, and then I'm pretty sure Thandie Newton was also one of the voices, and so there were a couple of really pleasant surprises as far as the casting goes in this film.
Yeah, Newton played Eshi, who is Taka's mother, which we should explain. Like in this movie, Scar, he's younger, and his name is originally Taka, which makes sense because, it would be really cruel if a lion parents named their Scar. Um, what's funny is Kovu from Lion King 2. I realized recently that Kovu is, I think, Swahili for the word scar. So it's like, oh, yeah, they really on the nose there type thing.
Well, here's the funny thing. I believe there's an African language. I want to say it's Swahili. Um, the word taka means garbage.
Oh, really?
It means garbage or waste, is what a quick Google search just said. So,
Damn.
um, so rather than naming their kid after a bodily imperfection, they just name their kid after garbage.
Damn, that really sucks.
It's like, hey, take out the garbage. I already gave birth to him.
Yeah, and Lenny James, whom I think I mainly know from Walking Dead, he voices Obasi, who is Taka's father. And yeah, it does feel like there's a little bit of distance between Taka and his parents. So you can kind of get the sense of why he would become who he is later on when he's Scar. So how'd you feel about that sort of thing of like making the audience kind of sympathize with him a bit more, even though we know he's gonna do like the worst thing ever in the future?
Well, psychologically speaking, it makes sense to have a character with a tragic backstory, a villainous character who is often verbally abused or physically overpowered or manipulated kind of helps you recognize why he says and does some of the things that he does. He has basically been trying to prove himself and make his parents proud of him his whole life. And, when you put it in that perspective, maybe one of his motivations to usurping the throne in the first place was to like try to make his parents proud of him. So I I kind of like that they gave him a little bit of a tragic characterization, but I also think that you kind of see a definite turning point in his character. There's a certain point in the film where you have this realization that he's not doing these things for the right reasons. He doesn't have the right motives. And you see him kind of slowly turn into the sleazeball that we know him from the 94 film, from the conniver that we see in the 2019 film. So as far as like character development goes in like a logical story progression that helps you realize who a character is versus who they're going to become, I would argue that it's very possible that Taka slash Scar might have better depth and character development in this movie than the character's namesake, Mufasa.
Yeah, and that was kind of a wild thing because this version also poses the this idea that Mufasa and Taka are not biological brothers. So
I
Mufasa
kind
came.
of figured that. I kind of
Yeah.
figured that. Especially in the 94 film. They don't look a damn thing similar.
Yeah, I guess for the 94 film, because they say the word gene pool, I guess I just took it at face value that, okay, so they are related.
There is genetics attached to it, yeah.
But here in this version, they are firmly like, yeah, they're not biologically related. So like Mufasa comes from the mountains, and it pretty much is like not it's pretty much a dying place. Like I can't help but think of parallels to when Scar was ruling Pride Rock, and we see that the land is dying, there's not enough food, and so
Mm-hmm.
in these mountains it's all snowy and there's not enough food for the lions, and it's really sad because Mufasa ends up having, he loses his family, so he ends up having to escape. And when he does get to the Pride Lands, I know we're kind of skipping around, but he gets adopted into a royal family, and that makes Taka, he and Taka hit it up, but hit it off. Sorry, I messed up my words there. But eventually, as they grow, Taka notices that his own biological parents are favoring the adopted son, and he's like, wait, am I not going to be the one to be king? And you can sort of see why he would get really jealous or envious, whichever it is.
Well, you mentioned there's a lot in there. But you mentioned how desolate the mountain ranges are. And I think it's a fascinating parallel because I don't believe Scar slash Taka ever experiences anything in the mountains because like Mufasa is descending from the mountain ranges. And so um their first interaction is along the trail at the base of the mountain. And he he never really experiences that type of lack of thriving. All he's ever known is abundance. And so it's kind of interesting that Mufasa leaves a place that is becoming increasingly devoid of life and wants to help the Pride Lands thrive, and have zebras and buffalo and what have you, all running around and living and being a part of the circle of life. And what's so ironic is by the middle part of the Lion King film, his brother has basically turned the land Mufasa cultivated into the land that he has left behind in this origin film. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
Scar never experiences it, and yet he turns Mufasa's nightmare that he left into a reality in the Pride Lands.
Yeah, and this has just made me realize that, in this film, we see that Mufasa experienced hardships, whereas Taka had a nice, comfy life, maybe kind of spoiled. And in the
Right.
original Lion King, we see that Simba initially doesn't face, any sort of trauma or anything like that. He's kind of
Mm-hmm.
spoiled. He's like, I just can't wait to be king. Like all this
Right.
is going to be mine. But then tragedy strikes him, and it almost feels like these movies are saying you can't be king unless you've really experienced tragedy, or maybe not even to the extent of tragedy, but hardships firsthand. Like you got to
Yeah.
work really hard on the farm before you can like be the mare or whatever. That analogy
Mhm.
went sideways, but I think you get what I'm
No,
saying.
no, I do, because you're right. Like Mufasa went through hardships and then descended into the abundance Taka was already living in. And because all he knew was abundance, because all he knew was thriving life, I don't think he really appreciated it. And I think he took advantage of it by the time he became king. And that's why everything becomes so desolate. He didn't have respect for the circle of life, and he didn't know how to maintain that delicate balance as well as Mufasa did. But I think Mufasa has a greater appreciation for the circle of life because of the things that he went through, because he didn't have any royalty in his blood. He had to work for and earn everything that he got, even if it meant taking things away from his brother. And that is really probably one of the more tragic stories that takes place in this film. You touched on it about how this was going to be Taka's inheritance, and then his own parents start to favor Mufasa. They met each other when they were cubs, and they grew up friends. They grew up really close. In this movie and in the photorealistic and in the 94, you hear the words brother. They love each other. They treat each other like family. And yet there's a lot of backstabbing, whether intentional or unintentional, and there's a lot of favoritism and even a certain degree of nepotism that goes on, and it can be a little tragic to see, a certain character, in this case Taka, losing pretty much everything they grew up on to the person that they are essentially the closest to.
Yeah, and I think they sort of walk a fine line with Taka because there are some things where you do feel kind of sorry for him, but there are other things where he seems too entitled. Like for example, we also get to see a young Sarabi in this movie, and you
Yeah.
get the sense that she and Taka were like best friends initially, and then once she ends up liking Mufasa, you kind of feel like Taka, he feels like he has a sense of ownership over her and gets really jealous. So that adds like another bit of context for what we see later on in Scar's life.
Yeah. Yeah, they were kind of like what Simba and Nala had grown up becoming. They were very similar in age. They grew up in similar areas. They had a similar, connection to family, etc. They may have been, half siblings or cousins, depending on how the Pride Land structure was going on.
Yeah,
But
my headcanon just ignores that and tries to think of other explanations. But yeah.
like interlopers that secretly impregnated a couple of the females and then moved on or something.
Well, I don't know. Maybe there are other male lions, but they're just always like out chilling somewhere else. I don't know.
Oh man, I heard this story. I think it was about cuttlefish. Um, there was like there was a pecking order where there was like a really really big cuttlefish that was trying to protect like a harem and scare off all the other dudes. And so this one smaller male decided to take on the coloration that the other females in the harem like took on. And because he had that coloration, he didn't get like a very thorough inspection from the bigger male that was chasing off the interlopers. And he ended up kind of joining the harem, essentially, and like impregnated a couple of the females because he looked like one of them, and the bigger male didn't know anything about it. So
Wow.
like interlopers encroaching on territory is not unheard of in the animal kingdom, but it definitely takes a certain finesse. So I guess that's a possibility, but I still see them as cousins at the very best.
Well, as Keith David's community character Elroy once said, "Now there's a man who knows how to marry his cousin."
You just had to make a Community reference, didn't you?
Yeah, but I'll stop. I'll dial it back. I just had to make that particular one because it's such an iconic moment.
Mm.
But speaking of interlopers, there is another Pride, and you mentioned Mads Mikkelsen. He plays Kyros. He's a lion. He has a pride, and apparently they're not as happy with their own home, so they kind of encroach upon the pride lands and
Mm-hmm.
sort of want to take over. So this is a conflict that, Taka and Mufasa and their lions that they lead are trying to figure out how to, get past this type of conflict. So what'd you think of this whole dynamic?
Well, I think it gave us a sense of what do you call it? Like it showed you how dire the situation was because who is it? Obasi, who is Taka's father, the adoptive dad. He's the first one that encounters Kyros. And he is mortally wounded from the encounter. And, spoiler alert, but he doesn't he doesn't recover. And there's like a couple of series of him limping around and finally finding a small cave where he eventually succumbs to the injuries, um, gets the chance to say goodbye to his two boys and like challenges them that it's up to them. He tells them the only way you're gonna defeat Kyros is by working together, and it's empowering in a certain way, and it's a little cliche in some others, but having a dying father figure tell them that they have to work together in order to defend their pride lands gives them the opportunity to like set their differences aside and realize that they either work together or they both could end up dying or losing their territory or worse. And even though they may disagree on how to run their territory, they agree that it's better for them to try to figure out how to run it rather than let somebody like Kyros come in. And so it was a cool sequence seeing this realization of, oh, we, may have drifted apart over the last little while, but we need to work together if we're going to make this work. And I don't know, there's something wholesome and very 90s Disney about that type of message. And I thought that, that conversation and that inspiration was probably one of the most quote unquote Lion King-esque conversations that took place in the whole film.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. Like they were going for a very grounded relationship. I think the music in this like really helped to hammer home that feeling.
Hans Zimmer
Um,
came back, didn't he?
yeah, well, you got like a few different names attached to this. You got Hans Zimmer, you got Pharrell Williams, Lin-Manuel Miranda, Nicholas Britell, and Mark Mancina came back as well. So yeah, you got quite a mixture there, sort of a dream team working on this, I guess you could say.
For sure. Well, I know that Lin-Manuel Miranda's done a lot of historical research, and he was probably the one that was looking into some of those Swahili montages that were happening towards the back half of the film. But Zimmer's overall score of this film was definitely a bright spot for me. I've always appreciated his music, always appreciated his work. It was one of the big bright spots from the 94 film. So I'm glad that they brought him back for this.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, similar to, like some people argue that Hakuna Matata sort of interrupts the flow of the soundtrack, and I agree to a little bit of an
Who?
extent, but it
Who
may.
says that? Screw those people. That's one of the best songs in all of Disney. That's
No, yeah, but
heresy. I won't hear any of that. Mm-mm.
No, yeah, but I'm saying those people probably like will like that song now that we've seen like a different side of this sort of thing. Because here, like Timon and Pumbaa, sort of, when the story goes into like this training montage that Mufasa and Taka do, Timon and Pumbaa are like, you know what, this needs a bit more lighthearted music. Let's sing a number, and so we have Timon and Pumbaa Rick rolling us like during this training montage.
Well, because like the actual lyrics in their training montage talked about how, never gonna let you down, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I like I was genuinely surprised that they found a way to have Timon and Pumbaa rickroll the audience. Like I was not expecting that, like, at all.
Yeah, it definitely was a divisive moment. Like some people took it as a joke, other people, and are really tired of the Rickroll thing. So
I don't think that song or that scene is going to be as iconic as Hakuna Matata, but I definitely see a lot of TikTok memes going to be made out of it. I'll say that much.
yeah, like I feel like instead of actual footage of the Rick Astley music video, it's going to be footage from this scene. Like people will think that, oh, I'm go watch a clip of something I sought out, and then it's just the clip from this scene of Timon and Pumbaa singing it.
Yeah, I mean, they one of the most recent trends I saw was them, but like the millennials trying to turn, I believe, from Shrek into like a charismatic church dance routine. So I was like, okay, we're going from dancing donkeys to dancing donkeys, I suppose.
Yeah.
Bunch of jackasses trying to turn Shrek into a gospel song. But it's I remember when when the little submersible went missing and TikTok got taken over by Bill Hader dancing. Do you remember that meme? That
Not
was
really. Like I'm not as, I actually don't have TikTok, which is funny because my dad like really loves TikTok, and it's like you would think it's the other way around because of the different
that's funny.
generations, but I just like I don't know, TikTok hasn't really appealed to me personally.
Oh, dude, I just found a travel bag on sale on the TikTok shop for way cheaper than I would ever find on Amazon or Temu.
Oh
So,
wow.
it has some benefits sometimes because they do these things called flash sales where things can go 30 to 50% off for like 2 hours. And if you catch it at the right time, then yeah, you can get some pretty cool bargains. But I digress. um, there's just plenty of meme potential with Disney characters doing a Rickroll. If they can make Donkey into a Methodist church dance routine, then they can make Timon and Pumbaa into a Rickroll meme without a doubt.
Yeah, potential is definitely there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Surprisingly, they also show not just a young Zazu, but a couple of his family members as well. In the original, like after the first scene with Scar, Zazu tells Mufasa, "There's always one in every family, two in mine, actually." And so here we see the two in his family that are like basically like scheming, conniving, bullies, basically.
They are, but they also had like a certain middle-aged vibe to them. I feel like the scheming and conniving was like those manipulative aunts and uncles that are like somehow ridiculously poor and they're trying to like mooch off of their relatives. Like that was kind of the vibe that I got for them. And do you remember the Dory's dad from the Finding Dory film?
Well, the funny thing about Finding Dory is that I remember watching it and really enjoying it, but since then I've forgotten it, much like Dory's short-term memory thing.
So the dad figure in Finding Dory has like this strange forehead shape. And I saw a meme the other day that made me realize they were able to animate a receding hairline onto a blue tang fish.
Oh,
Like
wow.
he legit looks like he's got one of those receding hairlines with the hair only around the side of the head. Like that's what his giant forehead looks like. And I really felt like one of Zazu's relatives had a very similarly animated forehead where it looked like the Hornbill had a receding hairline. And it was so hard to focus on much more of the dialogue because I saw a bird with a receding hairline and it was just ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, I also like that we see a young Rafiki here, and he's more of an apprentice at this stage. In the Lion Guard we saw
Which makes
was like,
sense.
yeah, and I think there was also a bit of there might have been another apprentice character in that Timon and Pumbaa animated show, which I completely forgot to mention. I've seen some episodes of.
Oh
I
man.
Yeah, I remember renting a VHS that had a few episodes back in 2004 after I was like really high on the Lion King one and a
Dang.
half hype. But within the last couple of years, I've also seen some more episodes on Disney Plus.
That
It's
has unlocked a core memory. I forgot that that was even a thing.
Yeah, it's really weird because like Timon and Pumbaa just talk to humans with no question. Yeah.
Well, and some of the cartoon adventures they go on feel like they were trying to ride the coattails of characters like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck to a certain extent. Like some of the weird, wild adventures that they go on and the anthropomorphization of their characters, like you said, being able to talk to humans like they could talk to Elmer Fudd or Yosemite Sam. It felt like for a little bit there they may have been trying to do their own Disney-fied Looney Tunes or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and it was really weird because there were also segments that would focus on the three hyenas. And it's weird to have segments focused on them when they're responsible for a couple deaths in the original movie, but here they're just comic
Right.
relief only. It was
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah, well, they were mostly comic relief in the 1.5 film too.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that Whoopi Goldberg's character's real name would be Shenzi Marie Predatora Veldetta Jacquelina Hyena?
Yeah.
See, I
The weird thing is, as a little kid, I didn't realize Shenzi was female. So like once one and a half came out, that
oh
was when
really?
I had the realization. I was like, oh, I had it wrong all along.
Oh man, no, I knew she was. I I don't know how I knew, but I guess I somehow knew. It's an interesting point. I hadn't really considered that. Um,
I had a similar experience with Turk from Tarzan, to be honest.
okay, Turk was a little bit harder to tell. I feel like I could distinguish Shenzi better than I could Turk because Rosie
Okay.
O'Donnell had a very masculine presence in that sound booth, and there were times where I definitely could not tell. That's very true.
Yeah, and like the line at the begin early in that movie where Turk's mom says, "Come on, little lady," and I didn't always know that that was the same character, because they called her Turkina when she was really little.
Oh yeah, she
Um,
got full named. Yeah,
yeah, but yeah, the more you know.
yeah, for real. Um, how deep into spoiler territory are we getting? Can we talk about the siege?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, because I will admit I've watched quite a few of those animal fight nights. Have you ever seen those like on the National Geographic or something, or what is it, Animal Planet, something like that? And it's coverage of animals that will go head to head with each other for territory for a mate or for food or what have you. And one of the favorite things that they love to cover is like lion pride versus lion pride, or even lion versus hyena. And there are instances where a pack of hyenas can catch up to a single lion, or a pair of lions, and get them surrounded and be able to bring them down. And so the siege of the Pride Lands, where Nicholson's pride, who is it, Kiros,
Yeah.
when Kiros's pride starts coming through the mist early in the morning to lay siege to the Pride Lands, I was actually kind of gripped. Like I knew that there was photorealism going on, but to see like a dozen plus fully grown lions traipsing their way through the tall grass in the early morning dew, getting ready for what could amount to a quote unquote all day fight for survival and for territory and for pride and for whatever else. To see that leading into that action sequence was very, very fun to watch. It made me kind of sit up in my seat a little bit and wonder what was going to happen next. And in my opinion, there were a few moments in this attack that rivaled actual animal fights. I can tell that they did their research.
Yeah, and they're really walking that fine line of being accurate, but also keeping it, PG enough so that, the families can watch it.
But they like hide it in the grass or between the trees, and you hear the snarling and like the punches from the paws landing and stuff like that. So like you're kind of watching it through that lens, almost wondering what glimpses you can catch sight of in order to tell who has momentum, who's winning the fight,
Yeah, and I will say that I think that's a rare advantage that photorealism has above 2D animation, because it looks more real, so you're a bit more frightened of some of the action going on. Like there were a couple little kids that were kind of crying during that scene when I saw it in the theater.
Yeah, I mean, it had been relatively mild up until that point. So I feel like the thing that they were doing was like building the characters, building the motivation, building the world a little bit, giving more depth to Mufasa's character, et cetera, et cetera. Like they're doing all of those things that, don't require a whole lot of intensity. And then they're like cashing in on it pretty hardcore during this final fight. So yeah, I like the idea of use up all of that intense energy in one big payoff rather than here and there in a couple of like small skirmishes or whatever. Like you knew that Kiros wasn't just going to walk away from it. You knew he wasn't going to go down without a fight. And so when the fight did happen, it felt like they were delivering something that you had been waiting on almost since his character was introduced in like Act 2 or whatever.
And there was also a bit of mood whiplash when because of the intensity of this sequence, they felt like they had to throw in a little levity of, since the Pride Lands get damaged from the siege, you have Timon and Pumbaa like interrupting the story and basically doing an ad for insurance. And it's like, what animal has insurance? Like,
right,
it's for the audience, but in universe, how's this supposed to make sense?
I don't know, because like what kind of collateral do you have that you could file a claim for or whatever? But they didn't seem to care, and it was that's on brand for Timon and Pumbaa. That's pretty on brand, being like, well, I hope he's insured, and if not, check out Hyena Insurance Services. I don't remember what it was, but I just started laughing when you heard their voices come in, because it's like, oh man, this is a really big scene, and now you're gonna try to lighten the mood here and now, and I just kind of laughed at the ridiculousness of it and didn't didn't catch the whole pitch. But yeah, that's very is very on brand for them to do something like that. But I I liked that it eventually boiled down to a 2-on-1 fight. And Kiros was big enough to take on two adolescents by himself. Like they created enough disparity in the sizes for you to realize that, hey, this guy already took down one king and he's not afraid to take down a couple of princes. And it really added like a little bit of gravitas to that final fight. But at the same time, this is the catch 22, because we know that Taka is going to become Scar. We know that Mufasa is going to become king. So really all we're doing in this particular fight is showing how Scar got his scar and showing how Mufasa becomes king. We know that these two are going to survive. We know that there's no Kiros in the Lion King story. So like it's really more about how it's all going to play out rather than what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I will say though that we knew that Taka would get his scar here, but it wasn't ridiculous like the way that Nick Fury got his scar in the MCU, at least.
Or even the way that Kovu got his scar in The Lion King 2, Like he just got smacked in the face by his mama. like
Yeah.
like what kind of a way to earn a scar is that? But like when you're fighting for your life, when you're defending your brother, when you're protecting the land that you grew up on, and you're jumping in front of a male lion that is obviously way bigger than you, and you're taking the punches that he issues to you, even one to the face, like again, we talked about it at the top of the show. I feel like there are a lot of instances where Scar Taka gets more depth of character and gets more development and becomes like a more accessible character than even Mufasa does. And the movie's called freaking Mufasa.
The movie kind of does feel mistitled. Like it could have been called The Lion Princes, and I think that would have been a more apt title for it.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, because Taka, he tries to take down Kiros, but he's not physically strong enough and gets the worst of it. And, the claw across his face. And basically, because he's distracted Kiros, Mufasa gets the upper hand and is able to take him down.
Well, and it's funny because that also plays into the conversation that you were mentioning from the first film about when Zazu is trying to see why Scar won't challenge Mufasa for the crown. He's like, as far as brains go, I've got the lion's share. He knew how to outthink and outmaneuver and distract Kiros long enough for the brother with the brute strength to step in and help finish the job. In that sense, it was brains and brawn working together, and I respected that.
Yeah, but unfortunately, if the Lions of the Pride Lands, they see it as, because Mufasa did the finishing move and, Taka was like pinned to the ground or whatever, Mufasa gets most of the credit. And because of that, he gets to be king, even though he's not biologically related. And I do kind of like, the whole thing. I do like stories that reinforce that being part of a family doesn't have to involve having the same biology, because people can be adopted into families. So
yeah, I mean, look at Ray.
Yeah, but throwing this element in there where it's like Taka is an outcast and kind of forgotten just because he didn't do the finishing move, it was really sad, and it showed how shallow the Lions of this generation were. And you can kind of see like Sarabi looks at Taka and feels a bit sorry for him, but he's like, don't pity me. From now on, everyone can call me Scar. And, he basically names himself Scar.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this fight kind of not only physically scars him, but I think the outcome kind of metaphorically scars him. And so I think it's a fitting name for him because he got affected not only by Kyros in the final battle, but he also got hurt essentially by the people that he thought he was closest to. And so those are quote unquote scars that he now has to live with and try to sort out. And unfortunately, it turns into a giant revenge plan that he has basically been plotting since his crown got taken away from him here. I feel like his usurpation of the throne, I feel like that plotting began like right here at the end of the film. I think it's heavily implied by the way that he carries himself and that smirk that he has towards the end of the film that he's already planning how he's going to take over. And it's a long game that finally pays off by the time we reach the Lion King.
No, yeah, it's kind of subtle, but also kind of on the nose. Like when the lions are celebrating, they're like eating, having dinner or whatever. And Mufasa is eating a piece of wildebeest. And so Scar is looking at that and basically in his head, like you're supposed to glean that, okay, he has basically the outline of a plan that, yeah, stampede of wildebeests will get rid of Mufasa. Because we've seen them spar with each other, and Mufasa is definitely stronger than Scar. So he knows that he won't get the upper hand in a one-on-one. So he starts formulating that plan that we eventually see come to fruition. And we know that part of why he despises Simba is because, he's a union between Mufasa and Sarabi, so yeah, like basically end the story there, and then we cut back to the future period. What'd you think of the way that the story was wrapped up?
You know, I think they tried to leave it open for a sequel. If this movie does well at the box office, I feel like it's open-ended enough that they could try to do something else with it. But I wish that they had given it a little more closure because I don't feel like this movie deserves a follow-up. So I wish that when they came back to the present day that they had wrapped it up a little bit more. But with Rafiki saying like there is more to your grandfather's story than meets the eye, I was like, oh, okay. They are trying to leave it out there enough to possibly return to this well. And
yeah, like what more can they do? Like I was very baffled by that line.
yeah, well, I mean, we know from the pilot of The Lion Guard that they could probably tell a whole story of Scar abusing the power of the roar if they wanted to.
Right.
But I just don't know if they're going to go that far into the animated lore. I think if anything, they're gonna maybe have like another set of interlopers. It could be lions, it could be hyenas. Maybe that's where Scar first forms an alliance with hyenas, forms a familiarity with them. Is if in the next episode, the next movie, the next installation, hyenas try to encroach on the territory and Mufasa chases them off, but Scar finds a place for them to hang out nearby and he starts, developing a bond with them so that, he can cash in on that relationship later on. That's something that they could do. There's a couple of different ways that they could go. I don't know if they should, and I don't know if I want them to.
Yeah, well, like I've said, I'm more into the 2D side of the franchise, so something in 2D would get me more excited. So, yeah, I don't know, like, and like you said, like some of it might depend on the box office, but maybe audience reception will also feed into it, possibly, and I guess we'll just see what Disney decides. I mean, they've got a lot on their hands, and some of it has gone in different directions. So, I guess we won't know until the future arrives.
The almighty dollar decides everything these days. If this movie turns a profit, there will be another one.
Yeah, perhaps. But what'd you think of the Dua Lipa song that was in the credits?
It's funny. Dua Lipa actually did a song with Elton John called Cold Heart, where you hear bits of Rocket Man in the chorus. So it was interesting to hear that the outro was Dua Lipa, considering the connections that she has to the guy who did the credits music from the 94 film. It wasn't Elton John outright, and I probably would have preferred Elton John, but um I didn't hate it. And I think that that's one area that they can try to, connect to younger generations and stuff, is to have music from artists that are a little more modern. So I would have, like, the old school in me would have probably preferred Elton John, but it was still enjoyable enough to listen to on the way out of the theater. What about you?
Yeah, I thought it was decent. I thought that they were stretching it though when like after that song they put a version of that Katy Perry song Roar, but instead of Eye of the Tiger, it's Eye of the Lion, and it's like that this feels like a real stretch right here.
Was that in Dua Lipa's song, or was that after that song?
It was after.
Okay, I don't know if I stuck around that long. Was I supposed to stick around for a post-credit scene, or was that not a thing?
No, there was no post-credit scene,
Yeah,
thankfully.
I
But
didn't think so.
yeah.
Mufasa will return in 2026. Like, dear God, please no.
uh,
I must
but
I must have missed that, I guess.
yeah, it was a pretty long movie. I was like, I had a lot to drink. I was like trying hard to hold it in. So like once the lights came on, I was like, oh, thank goodness, and just dashed to the restroom.
Hmm. Yeah, I try to pace myself, but I never end up doing it right.
Right. So is there anything else you want to mention, or should we just go into final thoughts?
Um, somebody asked me coming out of the theater, like just a random stranger, like, do you feel like this movie should have even happened? And I I came out of that film feeling like, yes, it should have, but I think the consensus you and I have reached is maybe it would have been better if it was 2D animated. If it was in like the Lion Guard style or even the 94 Lion King style, I think I might have enjoyed it even more than I did. I didn't hate this film, but I do think that when you don't have humans to play off of, the photorealistic CGI can be a little off-putting at times. And so as well told as the story may have been, I think there were still certain elements of the execution of the film that left me wanting a little bit. So I do feel like my answer to that stranger would be yes, but with a lot of caveats probably.
Yeah, I definitely think I would have enjoyed this more if it were like a 2D version in the vein of, the original film or The Lion Guard. Um, there would be changes here and there. I would want, like, for example, I would want it to not contradict the backstory that we see for Mufasa and Scar. And I know it's just within a little song in The Lion Guard, and it is kind of goofy, but I quite like when there's nice continuity between things. So, like maybe a
Sure.
2D version of this where you don't explain the Scar, but you see all the stuff that happens before, and it could still be a compelling story. And also a visual feast for the eyes with all the vibrant colors and whatnot.
Right. Right. No, that makes sense.
All right, so what are your final thoughts, score out of 10, and do you have measurement for that score for Mufasa the Lion King?
Hmm. I would say that as a, I don't know what you would call it, a Lion King purist, I did have a few qualms with it, most of it in the presentation. I don't know if I had a problem with the story. I think the story had a lot of moments that felt very true to what the Lion King tries to bring across. It did not feel like a Shakespearean film, which is what Lion King and Lion King 2 are based on. They're based on um what is it, Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet, respectively, right?
Yeah, and even 1.5 felt like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which is a play that someone made where it's like, oh, what if these two characters from Hamlet like see their whole side of the story during the story?
Yep. I remember somebody's mentioning that. So yeah, all of the previous feature-length films had some sort of Shakespearean ties to them. I have not seen any mention on social media of potential Shakespearean ties to this film, so it is completely independent. And in some ways that helps the story, and in other ways that hurts the story, because it doesn't have a strong backbone to lean on. It's a completely original story. And there are elements of that originality that are really good, and other elements that I'm still kind of undecided on. So I think I'm probably going to give it in the ballpark of like a 6.5 out of 10. I think there are some redeeming elements to it, but I think the photorealism and the originality slash lack of originality in certain places kind of did it in for me. So it's one of those that I would probably watch again on Disney Plus with my family or something, but I don't know if I'm rushing back to the theater to see it anytime soon.
Right. And what's your unit of measurement for that score? Like an object from the movie or something?
Reeds of grass? I don't know.
Okay, it's a 6.5 reeds of grass. Yeah.
6.5 reeds of grass out of 10, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'm in the same boat. This, the 2019 film, I think I gave a 7 out of 10. There were some things I liked, some adaptational differences that I liked for the 2019 one, but still didn't impact me as emotionally as the original, the OG, as the kids say. So yeah, Mufasa the Lion King, I think, is close to the level of the 2019 version. But the mood whiplash that we mentioned in a couple points bogs it down a bit for me. And like you said, like this feels more like a Taka movie than a Mufasa movie. It really begins really focused on Mufasa, but then really takes a shift. So it feels like there's a change in priorities in the vision there. And now you have Lion King fans like hashtagging Skarabi as a ship, which I do not like as a ship.
Skarabi.
Yeah, but so yeah, I think I'm also a 6.5 out of 10 zebras on this one. Like, I don't know, maybe like half of the zebras like what's fed to the hyenas or something. I don't know.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. We're both kind of in a similar range. Is it one that you would watch again, like if you were just kind of perusing Disney Plus?
So I have not watched the 2019 film since I saw it in the theater. So if I haven't seen that one on Disney Plus, then I guess that tells you how likely I am to watch this one on Disney Plus. I feel like it would have to be a situation where my roommate, who sometimes she puts on something on Disney Plus in the living room, like if she puts it on, then sure, I might sit down and watch some of it, maybe eat something or read something while watching. But yeah, it's not a top priority for me, really.
Yeah, that's fair. At least we got it in now, in case we're not going to get it in again later.
Right. Yeah. So thanks for joining me again, Zach. Where can people find all your projects and such?
Oh, dude, thanks again so much for having me. I had a blast getting to talk about something that was a part of my childhood, and now I get to make it a part of my adulthood. I'm doing radio broadcasts for local high school and semi-professional teams here in the Dallas area. You can find the links to those broadcasts by following me on Zach the Voice, Zach the Voice. And then, like you said, I do IPC and I do that little impromptu commusings. I'll post the link to that in a couple of very particular places. It's not something that I do like super publicly, so you really got to find it in order to know where to listen to that. But then I'm also on a YouTube page called The Legacy of Westeros with my buddy Sean, and we're talking about season 2 of House of the Dragon, as well as some of the source materials and things like that. So if you're interested in the Game of Thrones worlds, then go find The Legacy of Westeros on YouTube. Otherwise, you can just follow Zach the Voice for links on what I'm going to be part of next.
Nice. Yeah, and I'll link those in the show notes. And thanks again for tuning in, everyone. Delayed Replay will be back again 2 weeks after this episode comes out. And again, a happy 30th to the Lion King, the original last month, which you guys acknowledged on IPC during your guys' recent 10th anniversary. Is a nice pair of episodes there. And without further delay, have a good day. All right. Where do I stop this? Oh, here it is. All right. So, funny thing happened after the recording of this episode. Like right after finishing, I went with my roommates to go see a concert at the park here in Downey. It's part of a summer concert series, and it was a band called Tease. I think they played Uptown Funk and some other stuff. But at this park concert, I saw someone wearing a Timon and Pumbaa shirt that said Hakuna Matata on it, so that was quite the coincidence. And then I showed that to Zach via message, and then the next day he messaged me back saying my turn and showed me that in his car playlist or music or whatever, the Rick Astley song "Never Gonna Give You." What's the actual song title? "Never Gonna Give You Up." That's what it is. So quite the funny coincidences. But yeah, check out all of Zach's stuff, which will be in the show notes as well. And as for my plugs, before I let the other Steven take it away for the rest of the episode, you can follow me at Steven Shinder, Instagram, Twitter /X, Threads. I keep forgetting I still use Threads. Steven Shinder Storytelling on Facebook, stevenshinder.com for info on my standalones and stepping stones novels. And, there's also trivia sections for each book on there and excerpts and such. You can find those books on Amazon, and you can also find me on Letterboxd and Goodreads. If you want to email this podcast, email delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on nature, I guess. I don't know. You can also find me on Yesshift, a podcast /vlog that I do with my dad, talking about the band Yes. We recently celebrated the 55th anniversary of the first Yes album. And did I mention how Star Wars is it on any of these recent episodes? I was on their show like a month and a half ago, comparing the band Yes to Star Wars and rating it on a scale from 1 to 10 based on how Star Wars it is. So if I haven't plugged that in before, because I can't remember if I have, go check that out, over how Star Wars is it in their podcast feed. But yeah, I think that's it for me, and without further delay, here's the other Steven talking about some TV he's been watching, and he'll talk a tiny bit, non-spoiler thoughts on what he thought of Deadpool and Wolverine. Hey everyone. So, with The Lion King being Shakespeare influenced, I guess I might as well mention that I went with a friend to see the independent Shakespeare company perform the play As You Like It over in Griffith Park. It's a thing that's been going on this summer, and it was fun. I guess it's kind of a more modern take on the play, and there's a prologue, like a pre-show thing that involves a couple people in wrestler outfits, or I guess luchador outfits. You know, they had masks, and the play itself, like, everyone was really in character and had physicality, so there was some entertaining, like, physical antics, some funny moments, and some great music and great singing. And the lighting, was very colorful, especially, the lights shining on the trees in the park. And yeah, it was a great vibe overall. There was a great turnout. And yeah, if you're ever in the area for that, I definitely recommend checking out the Independent Shakespeare Company, and you can go ahead and look at their website and whatnot. They're easy to find. So since this episode is about Lion King, I figure I'd talk a little bit about a Dragon Prince. So yeah, The Dragon Prince is an animated show on Netflix I've been watching for a few years as it's been coming out. It had some people and a tone in common with Avatar: The Last Airbender. Actually, I'm not sure at the moment, like, how many people, but it definitely has, like, a similar vibe. It's kind of like, I would call it Elder Scrolls by way of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Or maybe it's the other way around. It's in, like, a medieval fantasy looking world, and there are elves and stuff, and the animation is so beautiful. Season 6 just dropped, and I watched all of it, back to back, all 9 episodes, and I really enjoyed it. Maybe more than seasons 4 and 5. To me, I think season 3 has been my favorite so far. But yeah, there's definitely something that happens in season 6 that I think longtime fans of the show are really going to appreciate happens. And it also got a little meta with the thing that happens, which I won't spoil. But yeah, really happy with The Dragon Prince season 6. And Cobra Kai season 6 started recently as well. The first batch of, I think it was 5 episodes. They've divided the season into 3 parts. Part 2 comes out in November over here. Part 3 sometime next year. But yeah, I was pretty satisfied with part 1. I do think Johnny Lawrence has grown, but he still does, like, cringe and embarrassing things sometimes, which I wish was not the case in this final season. And there's still a little bit of friction between the characters, but there are also some satisfying thing that happens, and the tease of what's to come for part 2, I'm really curious to see how that all plays out. So yeah, I really enjoyed this watch of Cobra Kai season 6 part 1. Yeah, it's kind of a mouthful, I guess. Other shows, so without spoiling it, I think the Acolyte finale came out since the last time I was on here, and my review of it is over on my YouTube channel, Steven Shinder Reviews in video form, and it does have spoilers, but overall I thought the show was okay at best. There were some things I liked, but the overall execution, I feel, wasn't quite to my satisfaction the way that it was conveyed, and there's stuff at the very end that I think would have interested me more if the show covered more of that. But yeah, it is what it is. Whether there's a second season, I mean, who knows at this point? I don't really know. But I was really satisfied with the season 2 finale of My Adventures with Superman. Now, again, without spoiling anything, this show really understands its characters. Clark, Lois, Jimmy, Kara, like, it just understands the assignment. It feels like Superman, but also reinvents it for the style of this show, and it's wholesome, and we are really eating well as Superman fans. There's a trailer for Superman and Lois's final season, which I don't remember if that has come out or if it comes out the day that this episode comes out, but the visual of like the cape out in space, I'm really gonna miss Tyler Hoechlin's Superman. He might be my favorite live action Superman, which to some might sound blasphemous, and there's stuff to like about other Supermen, but I really like how Tyler Hoechlin's Superman he's very nice. You buy into him being a dad, and he's trying to do good by his family. I just love this Superman, and I don't know how the next Superman movie is gonna change things or stack up against these other versions of Superman. I think Lois's actress will do a great job. I really liked her as the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, a show which I watched all of recently. I definitely preferred the first 3 seasons of the show. I feel like the 4th and 5th seasons do things with her character that I wasn't quite on board with. There's a storyline with a musician character that I think could have had a better conclusion. And the character Joel, there are some things about his trajectory I wasn't really sure of, but overall, an enjoyable show and some fun stand-up comedy scenes. But yeah, I'm really curious to see what the 2025 Superman movie brings for us. And and I hope that I know the naysayers aren't going to completely go away. It would be ideal, but I hope that they're at least more quiet around then. Now, sticking to DC, I've continued watching Suicide Squad Isekai. I think it just has a few more episodes before the season ends, but it's been a fun show. The squad in a fantasy world, and the audio is in Japanese. The voice acting is, I should say. And the ending sequence with Amanda Waller dancing, it's just so much fun, this show. And Kite Man, hell yeah, a spin-off of the animated Harley Quinn series has aired its first 3 episodes, and it's had some fun moments. I maybe wouldn't put it quite on the same level as Harley Quinn, but it definitely still feels like that same world, and, being in charge of a bar for supervillains and stuff like that, and I'm excited to see, what more happens in the show. Now, without spoiling anything, I watched Deadpool and Wolverine, and I can feel that this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I did not feel very entertained by it. And it feels silly to say about a Deadpool movie, but I really felt like, the cameos, didn't really... I felt unfazed by them and sort of not that impressed by them. I do kind of wonder if it's because some of them were spoiled ahead of time, whether it be via the marketing, the trailers, or reporters spoiling things that they've scooped up. But maybe part of it is also that we've seen so much of this sort of thing in a couple other recent comic book movies, to the point where they start to feel like comic book movies, where, to me anyway, they feel more about the other comic book movies as opposed to just telling a standalone story and being its own movie. And so also this vibe of this Deadpool and Wolverine movie poking fun at itself and at Marvel for, saying that things have kind of gone downhill in some respects and that the multiverse thing is overdone. I can see how maybe it's like trying to be ironic, but to me, pointing out the stuff that's been like going not so well doesn't automatically make spending so much of the runtime on it like genius or masterpiece or whatever. And so I felt kind of disappointed that I didn't enjoy this as much as the first two Deadpool movies. To me, the first Deadpool was an 8 out of 10, Deadpool 2 an 8.5, but Deadpool and Wolverine might be a 5 out of 10 for me. 5 out of 10 Deadpools, I guess. I don't know. Or 5 out of 10 Wolverines, whatever. Yeah, it just didn't entertain me all that much. There were a couple moments here and there I might have thought were funny, or maybe more than literally a couple. But I wasn't laughing as much as I was hoping. And, the whole wasteland vibe of certain sequence, it kept referencing Mad Max and Furiosa, and it made me, like, really wish that I was enjoying this as much as Furiosa, a film that I saw recently and I thought was really incredible, well made, great story, great acting and characterization, world building, and maybe it's silly to compare this type of movie to that, but I want to have that feeling of I am enjoying a film that I believe is incredible, and I just did not feel that with Deadpool and Wolverine, unfortunately. So I might be putting out a video that goes a bit deeper on it on my channel. There's a bunch of things that I'm busy with, but I'll see what I can do about that. But yeah, any other movies I've been watching, you can see me post about on Letterboxd. Yeah, I just didn't want to spend too much time on like all the various movies I've been watching, but Deadpool and Wolverine felt like a big one to really touch upon. And yeah, sorry if this sounded like a downer the way that I was reviewing the film. I mean, clearly I'm an outlier. I see lots of people really enjoying this movie, but yeah, so Delayed Replay will be back in 2 weeks' time. And without further delay, have a good day.